doesn't, decide to play nicely today, the governance support team will let the attendees know, and the meeting will be paused until hopefully I get back online. So because we need everybody, all the members today, from a quorum perspective. Also, this is, I believe, Angela, this is your first meeting of the CCC. So welcome. Really good to have you on board with us.
Thank you.
And we have a number of people from Police Scotland, SPA, PERC, HMSCS, Craig, I think you're with us as well today. So good morning, everybody. Okay, so next item is the declarations of interest and connections, and I would like to invite anybody to declare any interests or connections they might have with any of the items on the agenda today. And I can see none, which is good. So there is no other business from me. Is there any other business anybody else would like to indicate? I see none. Then the next decision we have is a decision to take business in private, and that's in accordance with our section 20 of the SPA standing orders. Can I please invite members to agree to take the agenda items 11 to 14 in private? And I see no dissent to that. Okay, so this leads us to agenda item 2.1, which is the meeting. It's the minute of the meeting that the committee held on the 5th of June this year. And can I please invite members to approve the draft minute as a correct record? And again, I see no dissent, so we can agree that as approved. And so can I please invite you to approve the public minute from the private meeting of the committee, also held on the 5th of June. And again, I see no dissent, so we agree them as approved. In terms of the action log and matters arising, we have got 7 actions which are proposed ongoing and 2 actions which are proposed for closure. So there are also 2 briefings attached that are associated with the actions. Are members content with the actions which are proposed for closure to close them? And again, I see nodding, so that's good. So we're all agreed. Thank you for that. So decisions taken since the last meeting. The only decision taken is that we approved a minute from a private meeting held on the 26th of June, 2025 via email correspondence. And now that that is all out of the way, this leads us to the Police Scotland Professional Standards Performance Report for Q1. And I believe, Lynn, that is over to yourself to take us through the report.
Chair, members, good morning. Could I just check that you can hear me all right? Got my headset in. Okay, thank you very much. As ever, Helen will delve into the detail of the performance report in a little bit further than I will, but just a sort of handful of headlines from me, if I may. So since the last meeting of the committee, we've obviously had introduced the 11th standard of professional behaviour, the duty of candour, as part and parcel of the new legislation in the PECS bill. In terms of some highlights from the report, we've seen an overall reduction in the number of complaints received across Q1, however contrasted by an increase overall in the number of officers that we have suspended and restricted. And I know that we will look at both those business areas in further detail at other aspects of the agenda. We have got monitoring ongoing in a couple of areas that have been drawn out during Q1, and whilst it's perhaps too early to draw any conclusion from that information, it's certainly something that we're keeping a very close eye on, and those would be the number and the type of the excessive force complaints, the outcome of the complaint handling reviews, which overall remain low in number, still sitting at around 2.4%, but a bit of a decrease in those handled to a reasonable standard. And as I say, Helen will delve into a few more bits of detail, if I may hand over to her, Chair. Thank you.
Please, thank you.
Thank you, ACC. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee. It's a pleasure to present to you today the Q1 performance report for 25-26. As always, I will try to pull out some of the key points and then very happy for any questions and discussions. As the ACC has outlined, our areas of focus and priority, and also the fact that it continues to be a huge activity within the professional standards area. And I would just like to give the Committee the reassurance about the commitment and hard work of the officers and staff across the team as we look to progress our work to ensure that our processes and our approaches are the best in terms of serving the communities of Scotland and ensuring that we are progressing the matters of threat and risk, as well as being efficient, proportionate and fair in our progression of matters. We are spending a lot of time at the moment looking at our processes and procedures, and I do believe that we're starting to see some positive impact as a result of the work that is ongoing across the full range of professional standards. And as I say, I'm very grateful for the efforts and hard work of the teams across the country. So in terms of the report, I was just going to jump straight to page 2, and I do apologise, there was a slight error in terms of the paging, and I recognise that there were 2 page 1s provided, but I'm going to go straight to page 2 as per the numbering that was provided on the pages given. I'm just going to pull out, and I will talk further about the year-to-date increase in excessive force allegations, which are of significant note compared to the 5-year average, but also the reduction in the discriminatory behaviour allegations with a race subtype, which has been previously highlighted at committees at being at an elevated level. So as I now say, we are noting a reduction there. Moving on to page 4, in terms of the complaints received, as outlined in the report, there is an overview of the complaints received within Q1 across the North, East and West Command areas. This is showing a decrease in previous year to date and also against the 5-year average. As always, though, we have refreshed our figures from when the document was created, and I will just highlight the figures as of the 26th of August 2025. We are currently showing a 1,523 caps received in Q1, which compares to the 1,388 in the committee report as it was drafted at the end of July, therefore a difference of 135 complaints. But though that does still show a decrease of 19.3% from the previous year to date and a 16.5% decrease on the 5-year average. So all of our figures are indicating a decrease, but I just note that the volume is slightly higher than reported in the performance report. There are also 21 submissions still waiting in CARU assessment and 1 in admin recording, just to give the committee the reassurance of our understanding of where the work is sitting within that area, and we continue to work through that. But that figure of 1,523 should be very near our final number for the Q1 report. I would also just like to highlight that 780 complaints were dealt with by frontline resolution and FLR during the year to date, which is an increase up to 56.2%, an increase from the previous year to date of 47.7%. I'm really pleased to see that increase because that means that we are dealing with those matters, resolving those matters that we can deal with through FLR in an efficient way for those that are raising the matters with regards to that. Also, an additional figure, our FLR within our NCARU team, which is our National Complaint and Resolution team, that has increased from 44.1% previous year to date to 55.6% previous year to year to date. So again, showing an increase of almost 11% in terms of matters that are being resolved within that NCARU team at the initial assessment, enabling swift and satisfactory resolution for a large number of complainers. Moving on, as I say, I don't intend to go into any details in relation to the North, East and Command areas, but just give the committee the reassurance in terms of the monitoring of that. I do also note that on page 5, Ayrshire Division is listed twice, one showing +1 and one showing +3. I would just highlight as the +1 is the correct value within that. And then chart 3 shows us the number of complaints across the last 8 quarters with regards to, you can see the trend in terms of that decrease as shown in our figures. I'm just going to pause on page 5 on the chart 4, which talks about the complaints per 100 employees by division. This was an action on the action log that relates to looking at the top 2 from the end of last year, which was Tayside and Dumfries and Galloway divisions in relation to that. Sorry, I'm just jumping to my notes in relation to that. So I would like to give the committee the reassurance that we've undertaken the checks in relation to them. The pattern within those 2 divisions are pretty much the same across other divisions, with irregularity in procedure and quality of service being the biggest volumes, followed by incivility and excessive force. Also, along with irregularity in procedure, insufficient inquiry carried out and others are the main subtype within those areas. So we have done that deeper dive. Hopefully the committee can take some reassurance that the volume in both divisions is decreasing, but clearly Tayside is shown near the top at the end of Q1 in relation to that as well. Just for a little bit of further context, the upheld rate in Dumfries and Galloway for the non-criminal complaints closed in 24-25 was 11.8, which is below the average for upheld complaints, and within Tayside and D division was 18.3, which is above the national rate upheld. So we are going to continue to focus some work there, in particular within Tayside and in D division there. And there are obviously a number of other contributing factors within that, but we will continue to monitor that and happy to provide further information to the committee if required. Moving back to the report then, in terms of emerging trends, the allegations, within the emerging trends, we've already spoken about the discriminatory behaviour. So the allegations now sit at a reduced level, with 21 received year to date, which is a 15 reduction from previous year to date in relation to that. As this is a welcome decrease, though, I would give the reassurance this is based on a single quarter, and so it's difficult to conclude at this time whether this trend will continue. So we will continue to monitor this area closely in relation to that, and are continuing to work with our Policing Together colleagues in terms of the review, which again was sitting on the action log. Within emerging trends, I'm just going to touch slightly longer in relation to excessive force, because of the 200 allegations of excessive force received year to date, which represents an increase from previous year to date of 24, and also an increase across the 5-year average as well. It has been highlighted previously to the committee about this increase being noted in relation to this, but the year-to-date increase is particularly noted within Forth Valley and the North East, as outlined within the report. We have previously touched on more detailed analysis in terms of North East Division, and that has been covered, and I would just give the reassurance to the committee that we've also shared the narrative with the Use of Force Monitoring Group for their consideration at their next meeting in relation to the data that we're seeing. But I would just like to touch a little bit further on the increase in Forth Valley, which is the most notable spike with regards to allegations of excessive force. A total of 24 allegations far exceeds the previous year to date, and also the 5-year averages. Although I would highlight that overall the volume for the division is relatively low in volume. It's clearly just the spike that we're seeing within that division. So we will work with the division in relation to that. The key themes is, in terms of the area impacted through excessive force, arms was 7 of them. The majority of those related to the tightness of handcuffs being applied. 5 of them related to the head. The majority of these involved the complainer's face allegedly striking the ground whilst being restrained in relation to that. And the body in general was also 5, which linked to officers affecting the arrests on individuals in relation to that, and 2 related to legs as well. So that deeper dive in relation to the excessive force, and clearly we'll be able to continue to monitor, in particular as we see body worn video rolled out more within the organisation in relation to the use of that. And I'm already aware of some positive impacts of body worn, where maybe a complaint is phoned up, and by viewing the body worn video, we've been able to explain the officer safety technique or the use of the force in relation to the actions of the officer, and that has met the satisfaction of the member of the public call in there. So I think it's a positive impact, although clearly still body worn at an early stage with its rollout there. there. Sticking in terms of the emerging trends, the report also notes that assault allegations have decreased by a significant volume from previous year to date and the 5-year average, and in relation to that. But and obviously, you would know assault matters are dealt with through the Article 3 referrals to PERC in relation to that. But I raise that clearly just because of that overlap between, obviously, we're seeing the excessive force, which has increased, and the assault that had decreased. And I do just want to give that committee the reassurance in relation to the assessment of these matters, with the criminal intent to cause injury being the underpinning part of the assault allegation. And clearly, we report those matters into PERC as per the Article 3 direction around that. And I know that there's some detail further on in the report in relation to that. Moving on in relation to irregularity in procedure, and again, I'm just going to touch on this because it was an action within the committee paper, within the log. In terms of the multiple subtypes for irregularity in procedure, they are noted and listed in the report, but I would just put out that all of them either involve low volume increase or have registered a decrease in relation to that. And those include the method of arrest, search procedures, and one that is often referenced as well is the officer not providing their name or shoulder number. So when we looked at the slightly deeper dive around how we can improve irregularity in procedure, which is what the action log related to the question, we're trying to raise awareness in relation to these matters and the impacts of it. We are proposing that the next standard will focus on the irregularity in procedure subtype, given its vast volume or the high volume within complaint matters. And we're also carrying out work through inspectors and sergeants forums to raise this and to encourage those kind of changes that can then prevent these matters. So the provision of shoulder number and that type of thing. So we are working with divisions to raise their awareness of these key trends and also make sure that we are trying to reduce them. Moving on in terms of the emerging trends, chart 8, I just highlight provides the full breakdown of allegations received year to date, and there is the supporting text in relation to irregularity in procedure and the quality of service around those. Moving on to page 9 in service delivery, I'm just going to highlight that the allegations upheld were an increase of 16.1%, but is relatively stable. But that is increased compared to previous year to date of 15.1% in relation to that. Analysis of our trends and themes are, in terms of upheld complaints, are discussed on a regular basis at our professionalisms and preventions operations group in relation to that, and consideration of prevention messages is then considered and progressed as we can in relation to that through the established means. The report outlines the timescales compliance, and of note, the 20.2% of the 114 non-criminal complaints closed year to date within the 56 days. This rate remains below the 5-year average, but is an increase on the previous year to date. And I think this is where we're showing some of the improvements around our processing around the non-criminal complaints queue. And I know we'll talk further about that at Operation Glade later, but just on this point, I would like to make a comparison that in the month of August, we have already closed 192 matters in relation to the non-criminal investigations, which is a huge increase from what we've shown in previous quarters, and that's in a month alone. So I'm hoping that in the Glade discussion, we can give the committee the reassurance about the work that is ongoing in relation to that. I'm now going to just touch on the CHR performance because I think it's important for me to pull that out, just given the reduction to the 38.4% of the 73 allegations that have been reviewed by PERC having been handled to a reasonable standard. We recognise that this is comparatively below our previous rate of 68.6%. So we continue to focus and to obviously take on the learning and improvement in relation to that. I would highlight though that the volume of the CHRs that progressed is a relatively normal one in terms of the 33, and the number of allegations involved, which is 77, was unusually low. So it was kind of a number that had quite low numbers in terms of complaint matters that were fed through in relation to that. One thing that we have noticed across Q1 is that a number of the ones that were subject to CHR and not handled to a reasonable standard have been investigated by our proportionate investigations team. So this is a dedicated team who will in the main focus on the category B complaints and carry out a proportionate level of investigation on that. So we will continue to monitor the impact of that, because we do reflect that that has been highlighted in some of the CHRs in relation to that, but we are trying to deal with these matters in a proportionate manner. And for example, 3 of the CHRs were all linked to one protest activity where we had taken a course of action to proportionately respond to that, and there were points that obviously PERC had picked up in relation to that. So we continue to reflect and learn on that. But on CHRs, I would just highlight that it remains a relatively low volume of 2.4% of complaints that have been reported for CHR. That is a slight increase, but overall, in terms of the volume of complaints, remains fairly low. Couple of final points from myself. On page 11, the PERC referrals, there is an increase of the number of referrals, in particular being driven by the armed policing referrals and serious injury following police contact as well. We have reviewed in terms of that, and I would just highlight that the armed police referral year to date, that while there is an increase, there has been none that have been subject to PERC investigation, albeit a few remain subject to decision as of when the report was written, but despite the notable increase in the referral, so this is positive, despite the notable increase in referrals, that the use of the armed policing resources in these incidents have been assessed as necessary, proportionate and justified in the circumstances. And again, with regards to the serious injury following police contact, we again identify some of the key themes. The dominant theme here involving individuals sustaining injuries when evading arrest by officers, and again we continue to review and reflect in terms of learning and linking division in relation to that. The final pages on page 12 and 13 cover the conduct position. I know the ACC touched on that in relation to the suspended and restricted officers, and we continue to keep a very close eye on the time frames and timelines in relation to our conduct matters, and continue to work hard. We've had some very significant cases conclude in Q1 in relation to those that have taken some time in order in terms of working through some factors out with the control of professional standards in relation to that. But we continue to track and monitor our trends and look at our processes to try and reduce impact on timeline as much as possible. And Chair, that's probably the key points from the report that I would pull out, and welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Helen. Comprehensive, again, as usual, comprehensive data, comprehensive presentation, good sort of, voiceover. I would like to open it up to colleagues for questions. I see, Paul, you would like to come in.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the excessive force, but you've kind of have gone into great detail with that and dealt with any questions you would have had. I am interested, though, on page 3, the 56.2% frontline resolution, and that's up on the past year date of 47.7, and I would have thought that's quite a significant, I would describe it as improvement, because we want more frontline resolution. Are you doing anything different for that 10%, almost 10% change to have happened? Is there a different approach, or is it just the way that things have worked out?
Thank you. I'm very, very happy to respond to that question. I think we know at the moment that we are looking really, really closely at all of our procedures and process across all of the stages in relation to that. And what we have really tried to do is encourage those conversations as early as possible through the NCARU team in relation to that. And we know, as I say, there's a number of different factors that we are contributing to having a look at. We know we've got the BDO audit that's ongoing at the moment as well, which again will further hopefully add some ability to that. We've obviously also got the staff investigators in post within the NCARU, and some of them are sitting in the NCARU, and I think we're really starting to have them up to speed in terms of the work and able to have those conversations and make those early resolutions in relation to that. So I think it's a number of contributing factors, but to answer have we made any significant difference in, sorry, change to our process around that? No, but we are just trying to make sure that there's factors such as body worn and being able to view the body worn as well, so we can provide the explanation. So I really think it's a combination of all those factors, but I thank you for pulling that one out, because I do think that is a really important measure for us, because that's that ability for us to swiftly conclude matters. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's better for the complainant as well, I would have thought as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
but I'm also intrigued about, you mentioned body worn, because this sounds like it's a multifaceted approach to it that's paying off.
Yeah.
But what was the next thing I was going to say? I can't remember. Yeah, body worn. I'm interested in seeing where we go with that in terms of frontline resolution and what the expectations can be. And maybe because we've not had it for that long, I'm not even sure we've had it for a full year yet. So I wonder at what stage will we begin to be able to assess its impact on frontline resolution and getting number of complaints down. I don't know if that would be another year or so.
I think so. We obviously, the rollout is only limited to obviously Tayside started, I think 6 months ago, I want to say, in relation to that, maybe slightly less in relation to that, and it's just been rolled out in our second division as well in relation to that. So I think it is early days. I guess I wanted to articulate, that I do think that there will be further improvements or developments that we will be able to see from that. We remain very linked in with the body worn team and to work through as that happens. So I think there's some positive, but yes, I think we're a while away from understanding or identifying the true or the full benefits in relation to it. But I do think that the little bits that we are seeing is in a positive direction.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Paul and Helen. Lynn, I saw your hand go up. Do you want to come in specifically on the body worn point? Or
if I may, Chair, thank you. Just very briefly, I think it's a very valid point that's raised there. The body worn video footage certainly, I think, will ultimately assist us with the FLR, but we do need to just make sure and continually monitor the balance that's taken to allow us to factor in, if you like, the time to review it, because that all builds time into the process. So we'll be constantly just calibrating that to make sure that we get the balance right, to ensure that something that should assist us greatly with FLR doesn't slow us down, at the front end of the process in terms of the time that it takes to review it. But it's an incremental approach, an incremental build up to the rollout, and that allows us just to continually scope that as we go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Thank you. Right, I had Angela and then Chris. Angela, please.
Thank you, and thanks both for this report. It's been really interesting after my first meeting. I've got a couple of questions, and forgive me, you probably answered these 100 times before in previous committees, but bear with me. It's linked to Paul's question about improvement action, and I just wondered whether or not how that's monitored. So that you can actually say, well, these are the things that actually directly attribute to improvement, and other actions haven't been as effective, so that you can really target things. I just wondered about that follow through. The other question that I really wanted to ask was, and Helen, you mentioned proportionality quite a few times, which was really reassuring. I wondered about if you could just explain to me the prioritisation of the categorisation of misdemeanour or complaint, as it were. It struck me in first reading that the numbers that are in suspended and restricted is quite high in relation to the action that is then subsequently taken. And I was looking back at last year's reports. So I just wondered a wee bit about the decisions to put officers in particular into those two categories, particularly suspended, and we'll come on later and talk about the length of time. But in terms of best value, I think that's maybe an area that I would welcome a wee bit more information on, and maybe we could delve into, maybe not today, but at some point in the future. So it's the proportionality, the categorisation of the complaint and the subsequent action taken against the officer, and whether there's any analysis of that, given the relatively low number. I mean, it's significant, but it's the low number of those that then go through misconduct or have significant misconduct findings against them.
Thank you very much, Angela. I see, Lynn, you want to come in to answer this.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the question. I'll come in on the second part of the question, if I may, and refer to Helen's expert knowledge in the categorisation of the complaints. So, in terms of the officers who are both restricted and suspended, it is true that some of those officers are restricted or suspended as a result of a complaint against the police, but complaints against the police do not always translate into misconduct or gross misconduct. So, for example, a significant number of the officers that are suspended or restricted are not as a result of complaints from members of the public, but that may be from issues that have been raised by colleagues, for example. So not all restricted or suspensions actually come in or result as a result of a direct complaint against the police, if that makes sense. So complaints against the police, although we've got the categorisations there of the complaints against the police, they do not correlate, if you like, with suspended and restricted officers. Now, in terms of restriction and suspension, I think what's really important to say about the restricted officers is that restrictions are very much a protective measure. So there's a recognition within a restriction that knowing that you're under investigation, either for a complaint against the police or a misconduct or a gross misconduct matter, places officers under a fair bit of stress and often anxiety. There's a whole lot of welfare support that goes around that, but it's really important that we recognise and we respond to that within the organisation. So where we, for example, restrict an officer, and that restriction comprises that they are not allowed to be engaged in operational duties, that's a kind of two-way street, if you like. It protects the officer and it also protects the public. Restrictions and suspensions are very, very carefully considered in the context of the allegation, and they are continually reviewed. Now, in terms of suspension has to be signed off by myself at Assistant Chief Constable level. It is not a decision that we take lightly. There are two criteria that have to be taken into consideration, i.e. that the continued presence of the officer in the organisation may frustrate or interfere with the conduct or misconduct investigation, or it may be in the public interest to suspend. Those two tests are very carefully applied and very carefully considered. And as I say, suspensions are reviewed every 28 days by the Deputy Chief Constable to make sure that I'm not, if you like, checking my own homework. And restrictions are subject to continual review. And indeed, divisions are also able, or business areas are able to trigger a review of that restriction by making a request to PSD to do that. So I suppose the nub of it is the complaints against the police that have come in from the members of the public, which is the categorisations that you see there, do sometimes result in a restriction or a suspension, but very often it is not as a result of a cap, if you like. It's a result of another matter that's reported by a different mechanism, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. My point though is, regardless of who makes the complaint or the reason why, it results in more low-level action being taken against the number of officers that are actually either on restrictions or suspensions. And I just wonder whether it's a bit like the whistleblowing paper that we had at ARAC a week or so ago. Is there something in terms of resetting how these things are viewed? And forgive me, I don't know the detail of it, but it does seem quite a large number of suspended or restricted. When you then look at the conduct assessments that are, I'm looking at page 12, that then subsequently follow on. So it's the proportionality of that I'm really trying to understand.
So I think you've hit the nail on the head in that the decision to suspend or restrict is based on what we know at the time, based on the initial report that's given to us. And as you've correctly called out, that allows us then to go on to make an assessment, and it allows us then to go on to properly investigate if indeed that's what's required. I think something that's very, very important that we retain a firm grasp of is that the conduct regulations are not really focused around punitive measures. They're very much focused on learning, development, and sort of improvement, if you like. So we would not expect that every officer who is either suspended or restricted actually ends up with a kind of punitive finding, if you like, either from a misconduct meeting or a gross misconduct hearing. So, as I say, that we make the assessment at the outset based on what we know, and please be assured, as that investigation is ongoing or that assessment is ongoing, we are continually reviewing those decisions, and if any new information comes to light, that automatically triggers another review of either the restriction or the suspension. So please don't think that we make a decision at the outset that remains until we conclude that case. That's absolutely not the case. And as I say, with the focus very much being on learning and improvement, it would be disturbing, I think, if we continually saw that there were punitive measures or disciplinary findings against officers. But I absolutely take on board your point about best value. We are very much focused on the need to make sure that we have as many officers as possible available to deliver frontline services to the public. But we have to balance and counter that against making sure that we protect the public and also officers whilst these processes are ongoing.
Yeah, and sorry, Chair, but don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that there should be more disciplinary, far from it. I'm really grateful to see the outcome of these assessments. I just think that in terms of the time that it takes for these to be concluded and these, that outcome to be provided, is it best value or is there a better way of doing it? Could that categorisation be looked at again and very quickly the assessment be made that is probably unnecessary given now that we've got a bit more information? I'll get more up to speed with it, Lynn, but it just strikes me as a bit of an outlier at this point.
No,
Thank you.
No problem. Helen, were you going to come in the categorisation part? Sorry.
Yes, yeah, I'm very happy to do so, but also just to, I guess, give a little bit more just context around the suspension. Obviously, that also does include a number of ongoing criminal matters that wouldn't be reflected within the complaint side of things as well, and an awful lot, a large percentage is off-duty matters as well. So again, would be away from the complaint. And also, we do see a significant number as things work through either maybe the sentencing or the outcome at court of resignations as well. So that doesn't always reflect as well, because if it hasn't got to a conduct proceeding part, it won't be shown in relation to those figures. And we have seen quite a significant amount in terms of that as well. And obviously, it's for the officer to make the decision when they choose to put that resignation in, and we need to work through the proceedings in relation to it. We will show the resignation when it happens as a result of at the point of the hearing part, but there's a number that happens as that process is working through. But very happy to provide any further detail or discussion on that point. And I think those reflections really do just remind us that, well, we know about the importance of that, the proportionality within all of that, and balancing all of that within the space that we're operating in. So to go to your first query about the kind of the categorization, I know we can have some wider discussion, and I'm very happy to share some more detail with you on the categorization. The categorization of the complaints matters was actually something introduced, I want to say it was about this time last year, when our unallocated queue was as such that actually we really needed to identify where the risk and the threat was sitting in relation to those matters, and also those matters where we might be able to either provide a swifter and proportionate resolution to it. So the categorization was introduced. The category A+ are ones where there is sort of significant sort of need in terms of complexity or risk, in order for that to be very closely monitored in terms of the senior management within professional standards. So really kind of complex matters there. The category A are complex complaints, or those that require protracted investigation. Category B are standard non-complex complaints where a proportionate investigation can be applied, and category B Cs would be ones that we would hope to achieve an FLR or non-investigation. And again, I can share this with you in relation to those definitions, but that categorization, I think, has helped us ensure that the complaint is allocated to the most suitable team within the wider PSD team in order to take that matter forward. So I hope that gives some reassurance on that.
Thank you.
Really helpful, both of you. Thank you so much for that. Okay, Chris, you've been very patient.
No problem. Thank you, Chair, and thanks, colleagues from Police Scotland, for the report and the presentation, which is really helpful. I just wanted to focus briefly on the section on organisational learning on pages 13 and page 14, 15, I think it is. And Chair, I understand that the committee's previously requested an annual report in relation to organisational learning. And so one of my queries is around how that's going to be incorporated into the work plan. But also, obviously, the content of these quarterly reports is limited to learning from learning identified by PERC. And whilst obviously that's valuable and an important focus, I guess it's not the same as proactive identification of learning from Police Scotland in relation to the handling of complaints, which would also be valuable to see in the context of organisational learning. So, yeah, it's just a couple of points from me there.
Thank you, Chris. Ellen, you're able to comment, or Lynn?
Yep, no, thank you for the question and the observation, and I think I'm always really keen to make sure that we can share that broad spectrum in terms of the learning in relation to that. And if we've not quite captured that within the report, where I think we have tried to, I'm very happy to take that way, or whether it is going to be built into the work plan. We've got organisational learning running within our conduct side as well in relation to that, in addition to the DSI organisational learning that we now, sorry, death or serious injury organisational learning that we now have as well. So, whether that would be, the committee would want that sort of year-long report into it, or whatever, or we try and articulate a little bit more, but we have tried to capture the learning from all of the different strands within that. So I'm happy to take that away to have a look to see how we could develop that, if that's something that the committee would like.
Thank you for that offer, Helen. I think the point that Chris raises is valid, and I think it would be valuable. So I would quite like to take up on that offer. So thank you for that. I see, Ilya, you would like to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Just really maybe add a little bit on the point raised by Chris. In terms of some of the audit work that we have done, we've developed a much better capture of the learning that is identified by the Professional Standards Department. So I think going forward, that learning is something that I think PSD will be able to draw out from the statistics. So quite a lot of work has been done with the professional standards to try to better capture the learning that is identified by the Professional Standards Department during the first year complaint handling. So quite a lot of work has been done in that regard. So I think going forward, we will see that data being able to be drawn out from the statistics so that it can be demonstrated in terms of the learning and improvement action. But just separately, Chair, I just want to say that it's very positive to hear the increase in the frontline resolution rate. I think that's very, very important. I just want to put that on record, and certainly the update that Helen provided in terms of the increase in the closure rates of the cases in August, that's certainly very, very reassuring. But I was wondering, in terms of the overall decrease of the complaints, I'm wondering whether any analysis has been done to try to identify maybe the root cause or the driver behind it, for example, whether that may be linked to the preventative, proactive work done by the PSD, or whether there are maybe some other underlying issues.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Leah. Any views?
I'm Happy to. I think we're probably a little bit too early in the kind of year or the trend in order to reflect on any of that. But I think it's a really valid and relevant point, and I think we need to make sure we've talked about some of the changes in our process, and at no point would we ever want that to impact on a member of the public's ability or right to raise a matter with us in relation to a relevant complaint. So we are very aware of that, and I think it's something that we need to continue to monitor. Obviously, our user satisfaction survey that we carry out as well is potentially another mechanism in order for us to be able to identify if anyone has raised one that causes concern, but also that we can continue to monitor the patterns and trends just to see if there is anything. So I think it's something that we're very aware of, and we will continue to keep an eye on, and grateful for any thoughts that Perk would have and Ilya would have in relation to that we can have those discussions in relation to that as well. And obviously through the complaint handling working group and all of that type of thing, if there are any points that are being raised, we can obviously feed that up and review in relation to that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Helen. And Lynn, right, I see no further hands. I suppose from my perspective, I really enjoyed Helen, your kind of narrative around some of the deeper dives, because I think that really brings it to life. And that's at the end of the day, as the committee, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the fact that the numbers are what they are to a degree, but it's what you do with those numbers and what are the actions that you take on the back of them that are really quite, important for us. So really appreciate that kind of extra level of detail that you've provided, and that I think that is quite reassuring. So please keep up that good work. I think we did touch sort of on the proportionality of conduct, and suspensions and restrictions, and I think that was really quite a useful kind of refresher reminder of how the process works and kind of what's at play there. So I think that's quite good. And I think it's good because also you will be aware of the topical reporting just now in the news. There's been a case or two cases, whatever you want to count them, around some of the firearms officers selfies taken, etc. So I think with some of the conversation we had around suspensions, restrictions probably fall within that, and there's also a little bit of sort of a lessons learned element there as well. Now I know that these are cases in relation to particular officers. They are out there in the public domain, and some of the kind of criticism has been around proportionality, so it kind of leans a little bit. That is with information that isn't out in the public domain. And Helen, I don't want to put you on the spot, or Lynn, but I was wondering, is there anything in this public session that you can give us in terms of, because to the ordinary public, at least the way it's been presented in the media, is that there was a potentially disproportionate process. Now, as I say, we are limited to what is in the public domain, but is there anything in terms of assurance that you could say within the space? Obviously, there's an opportunity for us to go a little bit deeper in the private session, but just now, is there any comment that you think you could make that would add to the understanding of the situation sort of in a broader sense? I see Lynn, you would like to come in.
Chair, if I may, as you've quite correctly called out, it would be inappropriate to discuss the specifics of the case other than what's already in the public domain. And I'm acutely aware that those of us in the call are in the meeting are very attuned to the different departments and responsibilities and remits and portfolios within Police Scotland, but that very often the public view us holistically. And more than happy to explore this appropriately and further in the private session if that's helpful. Mm-hmm. But I think what is important in the context of complaints and conduct is that the decision to suspend a firearms officer, firearms authority, that suspension, and I appreciate the terminology is probably not helpful, is not taken by Professional Standards Department. So firearms, as I know that everyone in the call will appreciate, is a very specialist domain. There's a lot of subject matter expert knowledge required in that field. So whenever there's any consideration to be taken around specifically an officer's access and ability and power to use a firearm, that is taken by those subject matter experts. Now, it's not to say that in the broader aspects of a case that there wouldn't be discussion with Professional Standards Department, but the withdrawal of an officer's firearms authority is separate from professional standards. So in that case, and I'm not taking a defensive position from a professional standards perspective, I get that we're Police Scotland. We did not make that decision. It was made by colleagues elsewhere within our operational support division at the time. I don't know if that's helpful. And as I say, there might be other aspects that we can competently explore in the private session.
Okay, no, thank you for that, Lynn. I think, I think with it being so topical, I think it would have been remiss from us not to raise this, and at least so that there is a record of of us questioning and us being able to explore some of that, particularly proportionality and lessons learned, etc., elements in the private session. But it is definitely helpful. So I think thank you for that. Okay, I can see no further hands from colleagues. So I think this enables us to move on to the next agenda item, which is the SPA report. And Darren, you're talking to that one.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I'll take the paper as read, but call it a few key points. This is our regular SPA quarterly report, which includes key statistics reflecting the position at the end of Q1 with comparison to the previous 7 quarters. So looking at the statistics firstly, and recognising I'm talking about the full reference period of 8 quarters, in the context of generally low numbers of relevant complaints and corresponding allegations, numbers continue to remain largely consistent over the period. Whilst the majority of complaints received relate to Police Scotland's senior officers, it's important to recognise that volumes remain low. In terms of the nature of complaints within the period, just under 3/4 relate to on-duty matters, with the remainder relating to dissatisfaction with quality of service received. Early stage resolution, which is the equivalent of frontline resolution from an SPA perspective, continues to be an effective means of addressing complaints of a less serious nature, with 1/3 of allegations closed during the period being closed through that mechanism, and with the remainder of those requiring formal determination over the period, just under 1/4 of allegations were upheld. Of the 18 complaints that were closed, 5 were completed out with the target of 40 working days. Members will appreciate that is a target that we work to achieve, but oftentimes there are challenges associated with that, which are out with our control, or cases can be particularly complex. And we include a short narrative explaining the circumstances around about that for those cases closed within the period out with that timescale. And finally, there were 4 relevant complaints which were ongoing at the end of Q1, all of which were received during the quarter, and 1 of which has since been closed. In terms of other matters that I would want to call out, the intention is still to resume dip sampling of Police Scotland closed complaints, with initial review of closed cases in Q1 to be reported to the next committee. Following our earlier publication of a revised unacceptable, persistent or unreasonable action by complainers policy, the committee requested that where that policy was exercised, that there was reporting into members. So it was exercised once in Q1, although the individual chose not to appeal that decision. The National Complaints Handling Development Group last met on the 20th of August. Normally we would include a summary in the paper, but just due to the timing of production of the paper, it wasn't possible. I will include a written update next time, but just by way of verbal update, really useful conversation, recognising the queue that we're going to come on to talk about shortly. We had some input from West Midlands Police, who talked about actions that they'd taken successfully to reduce similar challenges within their own organisation. We also met with the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman, looking at examples of best practice, and other conversations around about updated online complaint capture, the form used by Police Scotland following the earlier audit, the BDO internal audit, discussion around about Operation Glade, the queue which we're going to come on to shortly, and the group's next due to meet in November. Within the report, I make reference to a PERT complaint handling review outcome, a around about a case that was considered by the authority, that the complaint handling review outcome received in Q1, which resulted in a requirement for us to reconsider 2 allegations, as well as identifying a number of learning points. And we will provide further details in the public report in due course following its satisfactory conclusion. I continue to attend the Operation Glade Gold Group with a meeting which took place in July, and I appreciate Police Scotland's involvement of SP officials within that. And then last, I would just note, I continue to have ongoing engagement with Police Scotland in respect of the committee work plan, noting, one particularly we talked about organisation learning there, the addition of new thematic annual reports, but also the potential to review the proportionality of data reporting frequency, which kind of touches on some of the stuff we've talked about this morning. So I'll continue to engage with colleagues in Police Scotland around about that and beyond the meeting. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Darren, for the report and for this voiceover as well. Really welcome the work that happens between SP colleagues and Police Scotland colleagues. So, obviously the oversight ensures doesn't just happen in the committee. There's also all that activity that happens behind the scenes as well. So thank you for that. Are there any questions? My only kind of question was around the timescale for the reconsideration. Darren, do we have?
Yeah, so we can discuss this in more detail in private session, but the team have completed the additional work that was requested by PERC to support the reconsideration. And we'll hopefully be currently engaging with PERC around about that, and we'll ultimately take that forward for a discussion with an independent member for reconsideration.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, I see no questions for you otherwise. Thank you very much for that. That enables us to move on to agenda item 5, and that's the PERC report on Police Scotland handling of complaints and referral investigations. And I believe we have the double act again, Ilya and Raymond. So Ilya, over to you, I think, in the first instance.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'll provide a brief summary of the key highlights from our Q1 report. Specifically in relation to complaint handling, the committee will note quite significant increase in the number of the CHR applications in Q1. Overall, 74 applications were received, which I think represents 32% uplift on the previous quarter, and generally looking at the last 2 years, probably the highest number in a single quarter that we've received. Q2, I can probably give an interim update, probably looking very similar just now as well. So looking like from our analysis, it would appear that probably a higher proportion of the complainers are choosing to apply for a complaint handling reviews. In terms of the timescales, the committee will see that most of the papers and the files that we've requested from Police Scotland were received within the agreed timescales. In Q1, 33 CHRs and 32 discretionary decisions were issued. In terms of the proportion of reasonable, not reasonable complaints, you'll see that our reports indicates that about 43% were deemed to be handled to a reasonable standard, so just a little bit lower than previously. And I think Police Scotland's report indicated a figure of about 38%, so not too far off it. But yeah, the report provided some additional commentary around the overall quality of the complaint handling in that regard. 40 recommendations were issued to Police Scotland in Q1. You will see that 26 of those recommendations relate to conducting further inquiry. So that category now accounts to 65% of the overall recommendations. 40 learning points were made during Q1. The report contains detailed breakdown of those learning points and the themes. We highlighted some instances of good complaint handling practice, which was positive, but general themes include inappropriate use of frontline resolution and lack of contact with complainers during the complaint inquiries. I think the report states that there are no reconsideration directions. That's a mistake. I apologise for that. 3 reconsideration directions were issued in Q1, and all relating to the same CHRs, so all relating to one case. We provide a summary of our stakeholder engagement, so I'll simply echo Darren's comment in relation to the inputs by the West Midlands Police and the SPSO, the National Complaint Handling Development Group. Certainly found it very useful to hear from West Midlands Police about their efforts to tackle the backlog of complaints. Very similar experience over there. I think the key messaging from West Midland PSD was to focus on the quality of the complaint handling and perhaps focus on the robust management of the complaint handling teams throughout the complaint investigation. In terms of the practitioner forums, you will see that in Q1, there was no practitioner forums because instead we focused on our input to the new complaint handlers to try to cement the training that was provided earlier in February. So that was very positive. I can advise that the next round of the practitioner forums will take place at the end of October and November. And again, as reported, rather than specific PSD regions. So, for example, proportionate investigation team, the NCARO team, and thereafter the non-criminal. So we're hoping to conclude those by the middle of November. Finally, the report contains a summary of the outstanding recommendations from the 6-stage audit. Unfortunately, we've not made as much progress in Q1 in terms of the implementation, but I'm aware that there are meetings scheduled for later on this month. So hopefully we will get some progress made in that regard. And that probably completes my update in terms of the complaint handling part of our report. I'm happy to pause at this stage or...
Thank you, Leah. No, that was really helpful. And you touched on some of the questions I had. Are there any other questions for Ilya at this stage? Maybe Raymond will... Oh, sorry, Angela, please.
So thank you. I just wondered about you. I've lost the bit now in the paper, but I just wondered if you could comment further on the. You highlighted delays on the number of closing the learning points. I just wondered if you could comment a bit on the significance of some of those delays, and in relation to the further recommendations that you've made in the last period. Are those repeating previous learning points that would have perhaps avoided some of the issues that you're flagging in this report?
Sure. Okay. So I'll maybe start in relation to the organisational learning points, which are listed in the report. I think, regrettably, we've not made significant progress in terms of getting those learning points fully implemented. I think those learning points, they are of some age, and certainly we are in discussions with Professional Standards Department about getting those learning points implemented. To implement those will require changes to the standard operating procedures. Now, I'm aware that interim guidance for the, whether a specific department or nationally has been issued in terms of the learning that has been identified there. But generally speaking, I think sometimes the process of amending standard operating procedures can take some time, which may involve other departments, and that's my understanding for the delay in implementing of those specific learning points. Naturally, some of them are quite significant. You will see, for example, in terms of notification of next of kin and so on. Yeah, they are quite significant. I know that Professional Standards Department have taken steps to try to mitigate the delay by issuing interim guidance to the relevant departments, but those points, learning points, still remain outstanding. In terms of the repeat learning points, I think you will see from the report pretty much in every area, because the report breaks it down by the regions, but I think you will note that almost in every area there are pretty much similar themes in terms of communications with the complainers at the start or during the complaint inquiries, and also in terms of inappropriate use of frontline resolution. So yes, there are perhaps repeated instances of similar learning points being identified. They naturally are attached to individual cases, and they're communicated to the complaint handlers and their supervisors when those are issued. So naturally, we will expect as we progress for the situation to improve when those learning points are taken on board by the complaint handlers.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for the question answer. Thank you, Leah. Okay, Raymond, I think we can move over to you for your section, please.
Thank you, and good morning again. So I'll take the document as read and pull out some of the highlights from it. So when you step through it, you'll see there is an increase in referrals from Police Scotland over the reporting period. In general terms, that's welcomed. I'll not rehearse what Helen said there, but when you look at the detail provided in page 19 of the report, you'll see there's some areas where it is higher. The firearms presentation and serious injury following police contact being two of those. To echo Helen's comments, the necessity and proportionality around about firearms is a test that we would apply, and it's robustly looked at. And I think in terms of confidence and trust in policing, when we do a review, we have not instigated an investigation. So that shows that whilst that tactic is being more routinely used, it is used in an appropriate manner in terms of our reflective review on that. And the same goes with serious injuries. They are also up. And again, there is only two that have progressed to investigation from the number that's there. So it's relatively low. And indeed, the number of police referrals that come to PIRC, those that actually progress to investigation, actually only amount for a very small proportion of our workload. Most of it comes from Crown. So it's actually less than 5%. But when you look at how that then correlates to the matters that's referred, it's a really, really small number. So it gives that confidence in what Police Scotland are doing. And indeed, the fact that we're getting that high number of referrals is welcome, so we can actually apply that thought process to it. So I think that's a really important thing to mention there. And as I say, there is only 3 in that period that have actually been looked at. When you step through the report, we also touch on the recommendations that we put back to Police Scotland from the referrals. These are really carefully considered in terms of what we put back. They're generally for organisational learning. And I think it's important to say that some of the recommendations that go back, it could probably never be foreseen by Police Scotland that those writing standard operating procedures, that some of these events may actually come, because it's very difficult to predict them. But I think some of the work we have done, both between PIRC and Police Scotland, and looking at these areas and progressing the recommendations, or certainly the responses within the stipulated period, that has improved. And they go into great detail there, and I'll not to go through them, but we are getting that quick turnaround. And I suppose for those new to the committee, Lynn's predecessor, Stuart Houston, undertook a piece of work to do reflective reviews to see how these recommendations actually land 6 months, 12 months in, and it'd be interesting to see how that goes, and it'd be good feedback for us to understand if our recommendations are actually meeting the requirements of that commission piece of work that comes to the Chief Constable in terms of taking these investigations on. So that would be welcome, certainly for us, but in terms of the actual recommendations and the response to them, it is positive and very detailed, and these are obviously the narrative that's suitable for public consumption, so are formulated in that manner. So I think that's a positive piece of work that's ongoing and will be going ongoing, but as I say, the reflective learning from that would be very, very much welcome, not only by ourselves, it may well be for the committee potentially. And finally, stakeholder engagement. I probably sound a bit like repetitive here, but I've versed before the change to the law of corroboration, which is having a massive impact on the demand within PERC, and that probably relates to what I'm saying around about the low number of investigations in terms of police referrals. However, that is a significant piece of work, not only for us, but for police, and we recognise that demand piece is very much impacting on capability there. So we've instigated some practitioner forums there to look at good practice, to make sure it's effective and efficient, and we can have that victim-centred approach, if you like, so that when we're actually undertaking these investigations, it goes forward as seamlessly as possible. But I think it would be remiss of me not to highlight that the demand that actually causes for both organisations there. Body-worn video, obviously that's been touched on, and we welcome that involvement in the standard operating procedure, which I understand is going to be refreshed later in the year. And again, we will engage with that to make sure that we can feed in from the learning we get from that, because that forms a significant part of our investigations as well. So we'll engage with that. And the spirit would be desired. And finally, the memorandum of understanding, that obviously cuts across both sides of our business, but that is still ongoing. There's dialogue around about that, but I believe it's in the latter stages and getting finesse now, so we're hopeful in the very near future that will be concluded, because that's obviously the bedrock of how we engage with Police Scotland, so it'd be good to get that finalised in the near future. But I suppose that's a whistle-stop tour. The stuff going in the investigation space is quite static just now, other than that significant demand I spoke about for the other area of business. But welcome any questions regarding anything that's in the report.
Thank you very much for the report and for this really helpful narrative framework as well. I think you have just been able to kind of give us more assurance there based, in addition to the data we have. I think it's really helpful for us as a committee to hear that narrative and kind of your interpretation of the data. So really helpful. Again, that whole point around, they're all assessed, a small percentage progresses to investigation. That's a good thing, because in the other ones, there's nothing to see. So I think, it seems counterintuitive, but I think, we've kind of been raising awareness of this, through this committee over the last couple of years. And I think that's really good. There's lots of sort of, important points you brought up there. I personally would quite like to, the reflective learning thing kind of got my interest piqued. And I think that, yeah, absolutely agree with you. I think it would be quite helpful for, at some stage, for the committee to kind of have sight of the outcomes of that. So yeah, I will bring in colleagues for questions and observations. Angela, you would like to come in.
Thanks, Chair. It was on that reflective learning and the work that Helen's predecessor had undertaken. If that has already been shared with the committee, I'd really welcome an opportunity to see that. I think just reflecting on the papers that are on this, there is just so much feedback that we can gain from complaints, and okay, some of it may not be justified, but there'll be a lot of good learning. And the more that we can take on that free consultancy to think about how we improve, how we work and how we respond is really important. And I just wondered whether or not there is an overview of the outstanding recommendations from various audits or scrutiny bodies that we might see where the similarities are, and whether there's a prioritisation of what's been done when and by whom. Now, it's maybe not for the detail of the committee, but it would be good to have that reassurance that there is that ongoing awareness of there'll be some things that can be done quickly, there'll be some things that might take a bit longer, but they may have quite a big impact. So it's maybe something in terms of improvement and learning that we could look at a later stage.
I could maybe give you a wee bit of background on how the recommendations work between PERC and Police Scotland, if that would be helpful. So you'll see in the pages that are concluded in there, we will make a recommendation and we'll get a police response. The recommendation is generally serviced within a short period, 3 months, and what you'll get back is how Police Scotland interpret that, and they may amend their standard operating procedures, which will absolutely deal with that. So it can be concluded quite swiftly. Some are more lengthy and more complex. The piece of work I touched on that Stuart Houston was going to look at was, so PIRT can only make a recommendation. Police Scotland will decide, they have the autonomy to decide whether it'll be taken on or not. But what Stuart suggested is for these ones that we have reflected, let's look at it in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, and say let's Police Scotland look at it to see the effectiveness, and if it does add value and it does improve policing process, if you like, and practices. In terms of the PIRC aspect, when we engage in dialogue with professional standards, we make our recommendations back to them, we get the feedback, and if we're content, we'll say that is it closed, and it's now for Police Scotland to decide how they deliver that, if there is anything additional to that. So the reflective learning is pretty much in the court of Police Scotland, if you like. Our part is concluded when we get that response, and we then relay that back to the committee. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's certainly how it would work for ourselves.
No, thank you, Raymond. I just was thinking that in terms of the various reports that are coming into Police Scotland, having that overview and where the similarities are would be really helpful. But no, I appreciate what PIRC does. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, I see no further questions. So thank you, Leah and Raymond, both as usual for your reports and your presentation. This enables us to move on to agenda item 6, and that is the Police Scotland Professional Boundaries report. And with that, I believe that's back over to you, Helen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the report presented here relates to an update in relation to progression of the recommendations of the 2024 review into police perpetrated domestic abuse, and outlines the recommendations are being discharged in relation to 6 of them, and then the ongoing work. This remains a priority for us in relation to the kind of crosses over with some of the sexual misconduct work that's been done, and also obviously the domestic abuse review, and building it into ensuring that we have those checks and balances in relation to business as usual and the work as it progresses through. And I know that that's been spoken about before at previous committees. So I did think it was relevant, and I hope you don't mind me introducing him, to bring in Detective Superintendent Nathan Calderwood, who is the head of the anti-corruption unit, who leads in this area of work, because what I'd hoped is, as we cover this paper, he can give you a bit of wider context around some of the work and some of the developments and improvements just over that, and as we continue to work through these recommendations. So as the paper focuses on the recommendations, if it's okay, Chair, I'll bring in Nathan just to give a bit of wider context around it, if that's all right. Nathan, over to yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you, Helen, and morning, Chair. Morning, everyone. My apologies, I'm not having great signal, so I'll keep my camera off just now until I get through the body of the report. And Chair, if you're happy, my intention would be break this up into 2 parts. Firstly, give a high-level oversight on the figures, give a wee bit more context, and then we can move on in relation to the update of the recommendations of the 2 reviews, if you're happy with that.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you. Just in relation to the figures, I think it's important to highlight these figures have been taken from our iBase system, which is the recording system used by our National Gateway Unit. The Gateway Unit now receive every report or referral relating to violence against women and girls, which includes sexual misconduct and domestic abuse, whether on duty or off duty, and whether it's a police officer, special constable, member of police staff, or official police volunteer. As you can see from the report, there were 140 referrals with 99 named subject officers. Again, for your information, the referrals can come from different means. They can come from briefing notes from divisions, confidential reporting mechanisms, employee safeguarding, and what we did establish that just over 80% of the perpetrators were male, 19% were female, and for male offending up to the ranks of Chief Inspector. There were several perpetrators and subject officer with repeat reports, and to give some reassurance to the committee, each of those repeat incidents are reviewed by our Gateway Unit. and decisions made in relation to the most appropriate resource or department to pursue or to investigate that incident. 4 reports were in relation to sexual offending, 81 were in relation to domestic criminality, and 55 related to no crime domestic incidents. For additional information, 5 of these incidents were on duty, 3 of which were non-crime, and 2 of which were identified as criminal investigations, and both related to data protection offences when officers were looking at matters that they shouldn't have been and certainly didn't appear to have a policing purpose. So I will pause there for any questions.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any questions on this particular part? I think proceed, Nathan, and we'll probably come back. We will definitely come back once I think you've completed your presentation.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the recommendations, as the committee will be aware of, and as reported previously, the Police Perpetrated Domestic Abuse Review yielded 14 recommendations, and the Sexual Misconduct Review yielded 7 recommendations. These all recommendations continue to be discharged under the Violence Against Women Tactical Group, which is led by ACU, and have a number of internal stakeholders present just to make sure we've got the holistic view and we've got as much reach as possible across the organisation. I can report that in relation to the Police Perpetrated Domestic Abuse recommendations, 6 have been discharged and the remaining 8 are ongoing and hopefully will be progressed in the near future. We are working with areas and stakeholders such as Domestic Abuse Coordination Unit, Training and Volunteer Coordination Unit. In relation to the Sexual Misconduct Review, 2 recommendations have been completed and 5 are ongoing. A number of the remaining recommendations will be discharged, hopefully, with the implementation of a standardised closure report, which will be required to be completed at the conclusion of every police perpetrated domestic abuse or sexual misconduct inquiry. In relation to evolution of processes and governance, processes are now in place to ensure the independence of all police perpetrated domestic abuse investigations. As alluded to previously, the National Gateway Unit will receive every report of violence against women and girls, including sexual or domestic abuse, and thorough checks will be carried out on all of these incidents, including intelligence checks and previous conduct, criminal, non-criminal complaint history. This process will also support informed decision making in terms of where best the investigation may sit. In relation to additional reporting mechanisms, I can report to the committee that Police Scotland have very recently signed up to the Crime Stoppers Police Integrity Line, which provides an anonymous and confidential route for officers and staff to report crimes committed within the service. This supports existing confidential reporting matters, and that was introduced in response to specific feedback. This went live on the 21st of July this year, and we're already seeing positive results following implementation. Priority actions moving forward. Specialist Crime Division Public Protection Unit have agreed to support the implementation of a short life working group to develop a bespoke guidance in relation to police perpetrated domestic abuse, which will recognise the subtle forms of coercive and controlling behaviour often associated with this type of offending. This guidance will be intended for everyone involved in investigations, from frontline responders up to senior investigating officers. It is my hope that this guidance will explore matters such as the use of victim contact logs, victim safety plans, and perpetrator management plans for all police perpetrated domestic abuse, consideration of internal advocacy support and appointment of safeguarding officers, understanding and, very importantly, understanding barriers to reporting and ensuring all initial engagement is correct with the necessary supportive measures in place and ensuring the correct information is gathered. Consideration for extra support for Police Service of Scotland employees, including welfare officers, and the use of staff associations for additional support. And in addition to that, and whilst we already have established guidelines in relation to the independence of the investigations, I don't think that this is a binary consideration. I think this is something that needs to be considered continually. So in addition to that independence process, I will also be considering the development of senior investigating officers' statements of candour to reinforce the independence of any investigation. And I think it's fair to say, Chair, we are a big organisation, but we're a relatively small community. So anything that we can do to reinforce and support the independence of these investigations, I have no doubt will be welcomed. And that is a whistle-stop tour of where we are at with police perpetrated domestic abuse, and I would welcome any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Nathan. Really helpful reporting as usual. I always find the narrative that comes with it, the commentary, again, much more insightful as well. So you've answered a few of my questions, but I think there's a few kind of, I mean, firstly, really welcome to kind of, it's good, I think, for us to understand that it sits in the anti-corruption unit, and you know that kind of independence element which you've stressed is really, really important, because you know you kind of, you know, you touched on this in your presentation, that the independence, they can't be any allegation of, oh, it's coppers investigating their own, and you know, as such, that some might be getting it may be a less robust kind of investigation. So I think that is really important for us to kind of put that into context. That it's that's where it sits. I think that was really quite helpful to understand. I'm just trying to understand, and this is a question maybe for Helen or Lynn as well. So I think in the past, and Darren as well, whoever can help me make sense of this, but I think in the past, I know it started off with sexual offences, then it got extended to domestic offences. But my understanding is now you've brought all of this together into one kind of work stream, right? So my understanding is that when you talk about a particular reporting period, it covers now that broader remit it started off, I think, as I say, originally with sexual offences, and now it's just a broader remit. Is that right? Darren, you'd like to come in there?
Yeah, thanks, Katharina. And I have had a conversation with Helen around this as well. So yeah, there have been 3 reviews undertaken, and obviously, whilst the paper hones in on the more recent domestic circumstances review, Nathan's helpfully provided an update around about the sexual circumstances review verbally, and we've agreed that going forward, reporting will be across the whole as part of the biannual reports.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you for that. That definitely helps me navigate myself. I'm pretty sure I also saw a reference to sexual in the paper as well during the reporting periods report. So I think it's at 1.5. So I think it makes perfect sense. So I think this approach of looking in a consistent way at all of these circumstances and reporting in a consistent way going forward gives us that kind of important baseline as well. Again, you know, kind of, we're always really interested, I think, as a committee, not just in snapshots and kind of retrospectives, although they're really quite helpful, but also in those ongoing trends, sort of reporting period to reporting period. Again, because this is what enables us to see if there are any corrective measures or any organizational learning or anything, any kind of measures taken to reduce those instances as far as possible, naturally. If they're basically having the desired impact. So that's good. I would like to I see Alan, you need to step off, no problem. Thank you for letting us know. Are there any questions from colleagues on this paper? And I can see none. So thank you for the work that you do in this space, and thank you for the reporting and for clearing up kind of the where are we from a reporting perspective question that I had. And yeah, just before I let you go, having just said thank you, just on some of the actions. I know there have been some time scales that have slipped a little bit. So, and I was wondering if there is anything that you can help us in terms of understanding any reasons for the delay, if there's any key blockers there, or what are some of the reasons for the delay?
Sorry, Chair, the delays in what aspect? Sorry.
So it's in the implementation of the recommendations. So I think, is that right? There's only 6 out of the 14 that are complete. But I think originally there was a commitment of trying to get them all done. So I was just wondering around the 6, I believe, or no, sorry, 14 minus 6. It's what, eight recommendations which haven't been completed.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question, and I give just to give some reassurance. Progress is being made on all of them, and again, I'm very careful when I complete an action and when I don't complete an action. And I think what's really important is that this isn't just a snapshot in time. This is continuous improvement. We've got continuous governance in place so that we have long-lasting processes that ensures, again, it's not a snapshot in time, but it's embedded and it continues to be reviewed with governance in place. So my answer to that is, I don't think there has been any delay. I think we're just very careful in relation to when we complete and when we don't complete.
Okay, well that's helpful as well. I'll let Helen come in, of course. Helen.
I will just add slightly to that. I also think, and what's really important is it's the crossovers across across Police Scotland, so wider than ACU, so the links in with SCD, the links in with local policing divisions. So actually to make sure that these recommendations, and I will give you the reassurance, Nathan is very focused on making sure that they are discharged to their fullest of functions in terms of impact and development of our processes. It's that linking across, in particular with our colleagues in SCD who hold that sort of specialist function around the domestic offending, the sexual offending, and then obviously the part that we feed in terms of obviously the police involvement in terms of that. So I think that has been the cause of some of the points, and you know, as Nathan said, really try and focus on driving them forward with the right people around the table to make sure it has the maximum impact.
Yeah. No, thank you both, and I think that's just really quite important to draw that out. So, you know, the fact that they haven't been completed doesn't mean that there's been no progress. It's just you've got a particularly high standard in terms of what that means. And, you know, absolutely take your point that it's better to do it right and take the time and make sure not to close it until you're satisfied that it has been fully implemented. So maybe it's just then a question of kind of just presentation, you know, so, and kind of expectation management on our part, and I think that's perfectly sensible. Okay, so no, that I think definitely concludes. I see no further hands, so that definitely concludes this item. Again, thank you, Nathan, for joining us. And this enables us to move on swiftly to Operation Glade, if we may. And I think that's Lynn, and Lynn, over to you.
It is indeed, Chair. Thank you very much. And Helen will obviously support as well Superintendent James Mann, who's very much leading the charge, if you like, in and around Operation Glade, which, as we discussed last time, is our response to the backlog that we've got in complaints. So I'll take the report as read, if I may, and just draw out again a handful of high-level observations, and then happy to move to any sort of specific questions around any aspects of it. So, as Darren alluded to earlier, he's very much embedded in the Gold group that I chair for Glade, and just on a personal basis, I'm really grateful to his contribution, or really grateful for his contribution to that, and indeed the discussions that we had at the last meeting of the committee back in May, and some of the support, the suggestion, and the feedback that we got from members around how we might continue to take this forward. And I think in the last report we did set out the actions that had been taken in the sort of preceding 18-month period, which I wouldn't propose to rehearse, but rather give a snapshot of where we're at now. So in terms of the specifics of the report, the data download, if you like, was taken for that on the 1st of August. And I will not lie, that was a pretty anxious time in relation to a number of aspects of policing, but as members will be aware, we had Operational Row, which was the visit of the President of the US. Shortly thereafter, Operation Oclate, which was the Vice President's visit, and peak summer leave, all of which were a significant drain in resource across the organisation. So I was very mindful of the impact that might have on the complaint handling ability. And indeed, at the time that we drew down the data, that was sitting pretty much unchanged at 1052 unallocated. I am, however, cautiously optimistic that we've got some movement in the right direction, because as we've touched on a couple of bits earlier in the discussion, we've now got that increased FLR rate, which is above 50% for, you know, the first time in some considerable period. Last year, I think we closed over the course of 24-25 606 complaints. In the last quarter, we closed 114. But over the course of August alone, set against the backdrop, we've managed to close, as Helen pointed out earlier, 192. We've seen that reduction then, which takes us currently today round to 970 unallocated. That is supported by, as I say, that increase in frontline resolution, and also some significant increases in productivity across the business areas. So whilst I would be the first to acknowledge that there is a way to go with this, we are for the first time seeing it below 4 figures, as I say, for the first time in a couple of years, and we're sustaining that and indeed driving it down week on week. And that's where we need to go, and where we need to push, and where we need to stay. In terms of the work that's ongoing then, it's, if you like, a bit of a concurrent approach at a tactical and strategic level. So in terms of tactical response, the focus on FLR, the focus on productivity, and pinpointing and addressing bottlenecks that we've got in the system, which I think has allowed us for that greater throughput. At a strategic level, we are, as you know, there's a number of reviews ongoing, not least the BDO review that looks at our processes and our model. We're continuing with the benchmarking and learning, and James is happy to elaborate on any of that, because I know that we had a significant discussion around that, and also some really good meetings in the last month around automation, data processing, etc., all of which will land, I hope, impact in the coming months. So I don't propose to go into any of the specifics at this point. More than happy to take any member questions and talk through any of the kind of drill down aspects that your members might look for some more information from us on. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn, for the report, and again for this voiceover, helpful as usual. I am seeing if members have got questions. Angela, please.
Thank you, and thanks for this report. It's really reassuring just to see the work that's been undertaken in this area, and so thank you. I suppose it was in some of the paragraph 2.4, you usefully highlight some of the work that you're doing to improve areas. So I just wondered whether you could say a wee bit more about some of them. Some of them seem to be I would call low level, you know, some of the admin processes and so on might be able to be streamlined quite quickly. Others, I can imagine the automation and so on might take a wee bit longer. So I just wondered whether or not you've got timelines in there. And the other bit is, some of this will depend on other areas of Police Scotland, whether or not you've got that buy-in and the resources that you need to be able to do it. And my final point was the West Midlands presentation that was referred to by Raymond earlier. I wouldn't mind just having a very brief update on that, and what were the key elements of it. I'm sure there was lots, but what the key elements from that were that you picked up that we might benefit from.
I'll come in, if I may, around those last 2 points, and then James has had subsequent and further meetings, and also really led on the sort of benchmarking, etc. So if I may, James's hand is already up. So you're absolutely right, Angela, in terms of some of the work that we would like to do in this space is reliant upon support, if you like, and resource from other areas of Police Scotland. We have had very significant discussion with colleagues colleagues across a number of business areas. They understand the imperative in this space. They understand the impact that it has on public trust and confidence. And although there are always competing demands, we absolutely have got that buy-in. And I would draw attention just to the workshop, and James may want to say more about that we had in July with the Chief Data Office and continuous improvement, really leaning on them, and they're up for the job, if you like, and really willing to sort of align resource and get sleeves rolled up to try and support us in progressing that. In terms of West Midlands, and happy to sort of brief off table or bring a separate report, some really, really interesting insights from West Midlands, which were, I have to say, helpful. And it did give us a few pointers. But I think what we need to bear in mind is the financial position across the two organisations is a little bit different. The workforce mix against the two organisations is a little bit different. And as colleagues from PERC will attest, we need to work, or at least very much align with the PERC complaint handling guidelines. So much of the work that was done in West Midlands was done against a very different backdrop. So it's not to say that we can't take forward some of the learning from there. They looked very much at their processes. They had a ruthless, I think it would be fair to say, focus, James, on some people that they brought in from a recruitment agency in terms of training them and scrutinising their productivity. We've already taken some lessons from that, and as I said, that's delivered some productivity improvements in our area, but it's not a like for like, as I know that you will appreciate. Apologies, I've lost about half the people off the screen here, so it's slightly disconcerting. So more than happy, if it would be helpful, to bring a sort of brief paper to the next board around the West Midlands piece. And James, I know if you're still in the call, you'll add some more specifics to that, because you've had a couple of meetings with Catherine. But I'll probably wish there and bring in James if he's still actually online. I'm not sure if he is. Can you see him?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lynn. We are all still here. We're all still here.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Listening intently, we're here. And James, over to you.
Still here. Thank you, ACC. Thanks, Chair. So just to give some reassurance round about benchmarking, a good point. I do have a kind of short, medium and long-term plan in terms of the tactical viable options kind of available to me just now. The biggest learning that I've taken from forces like West Midlands and other organisations is round about that robust management of what the investigators are doing, pretty much down to an hourly basis and on a daily basis. So we have implemented some real good performance metrics since the 1st of June, since last meeting, and I've seen that really improve the productivity. Just to give you a flavour, I know the Chief Super and the ACC has already mentioned what we've achieved in August. So just to give you a weekly breakdown, the team have closed off 25 cases in the first week, 51 cases in the second week, 40 cases in the third week of August, and 74 cases in the last week. And up until today, my kind of weekly snapshot shows that they've completed another 40. So real good productivity. The way that I've achieved that is by giving them autonomy to obviously make brave decisions and how they come to conclusions for final letters. Another piece of learning I took from West Midlands was the simplification of final letters for proportionate inquiries round about the category Bs that the Chief Super mentioned earlier on. So they're the key takeaways from West Midlands. And as I say, I have implemented those because they're within my gift at present time. The other tactical options that have proved viable in other forces round about robotics and automation are things that are on the medium to long term plan that I have, and happy to report specific timescales for next meeting. However, I'm really quite happy with the progress the team have made, as the ACC mentioned, in terms of specifically the month of August, and a reassurance that I'll continue to push and drive in terms of productivity to ensure the community get the service they deserve in terms of non-criminal complaints.
Thank you very much both for those answers. I think, Angela, does that cover your questions?
Yeah, no, that's great. And just to say, really, that's lots of assurance in terms of that plan that you referenced, James. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I would suggest that maybe we get an off-table briefing on the West Midlands, and you know, I think there is interest definitely, but it doesn't feel like necessarily it's a sort of a committee level kind of paper. So I suggest that we we get Darren liaising with Police Scotland colleagues to get something out to the board. I see lots of nodding around that, so that's good. Chris wanted to come in, but Ilya, did you want to come in on this just specifically before we move on to Chris's question? No?
Not on this specific point, no.
Right, okay. In that case, I'll take Chris first and then I'll come to you. Chris, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, colleagues, for the report. I think you've touched on it in relation to Angela's question and the answer to Angela's question around buy-in, but it was really just around the impact of the police staff investigators and the importance of taking whatever action you can to retain that resource given its impact.
I'll come in that if I may, and Chris, you make again a really valid point. The value that they add is not lost on us, and I think it was a bit of a slower burn, if I'm honest, than we anticipated, because not unreasonably, it took time for the investigators to get up to speed, understand the processes and start to make some real impact. And I think that is what we've seen probably over the last 2-3 months, as them really start to drive through this. So we are working just now. There's a lot of, and I know that some members will be aware from other committees, a lot of budget discussions ongoing just now. So we are really reviewing our budget, reviewing our vacancies, reviewing our resources, and more importantly, looking at our workforce mix to see that to make sure that we get the balance right across the business, but very much with a focus of retaining as many of the civilian investigators as we can. A, because of the skill set that they now have and the value that they add, but B, the corollary of that is that it actually, in many instances, allows us to potentially move warranted officers out into frontline posts where they absolutely need a warrant card, but we have that support from highly skilled, highly experienced, really value-adding members of police staff as well. So that work is very much ongoing, and I hope to be able to bring an update on that, if not to the next board, then certainly the one after, in terms of where we are with that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's helpful, and obviously it is good to hear that the bedding in is you're seeing the impact and everything you're doing in a challenging context in terms of getting the balance right, and I look forward to hearing more about that in future, as you say.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Ilya, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, firstly, very, very reassuring to hear in terms of the increase in the closure rates. That certainly is a very, very positive development. But just a quick question maybe for James or Helen. The number of the overall outstanding complaints is still quite significant. I'm just wondering, are those complaints tracked in terms of the age of the complaints that are currently outstanding? For example, do we have a figure for the overall number of complaints that are perhaps already over the 56 days within the backlog?
You can comment on that.
Ilya, yes, we do. Is the answer in relation to that? We do track them, and obviously when we add in the categorization as well, in relation to obviously that impacts in terms of maybe some of the timeframes in relation to that, but very much within the categories, working at those oldest ones in terms of kind of getting those getting those allocated and progressed in terms of that, balanced against some of the kind of A+ ones that we have at the moment, which, as you know, take that significant time of complexity within that. So I don't know the exact sort of time frame off the top of my head, Ilya, but I'm very happy that we can engage with you further in respect to that. Unless, James, you've got anything further that you want to add. I know there's been really good progress on the category B ones in relation to timescales, but that definitely forms to give the reassurance that a kind of allocation part in the decision making, if that makes sense. James, I don't know if you'd add anything further.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. We're really making inroads in terms of the category Bs because of the proportionate nature of the inquiry and the simplification of the final letters in terms of the proportionate team. However, I can get you specific sort of ages of them off table if that's okay, Ilya.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. I mean, there's actually Angela, and Angela, I think you want to come back in.
It was just to pick up on Chris's point about the civilian investigators, which I thought was, a really welcomed development. But rather than bringing them in temporarily, and I see that, you have a bit of turnover because of that, whether there was any consideration of different models. Just conscious that in other organisations that I've been with, there's like a pool of trained people that can be brought in to deal with issues as and when, but they also do other things. So more of a kind of contract for service rather than a contract for employment. And that gives the individuals a bit more flexibility and the service a bit more flexibility as well. So it's more of a suggestion, forgive me, I'm probably straddling into operational issues, but I thought it's maybe something that may be worth thinking about. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. No, thank you for that, Angela. I see lots of nodding by colleagues. And I, just to kind of sum this up, I mean, I think it definitely feels to me certainly like a bit of a night and day. If I kind of cast my mind back about a year ago or so when we started some of this conversation. So it does feel like it is, due to all the effort that kind of went before that, that the organisation is starting to get a better grip on this. So really thank you for that to Lynn and also colleagues who have started this process, because we know it's been going on for a while now. So, but certainly this most recent focus on this, and the difference that James is obviously making and colleagues, that it does give us more confidence. So I absolutely take your point, and the summer was, if ever there was going to be an impact on productivity levels, it was certainly going to be during these particular summer months, not just the fact that they're summer months, but also with the two really large scale operations. And we did have that conversation at board a couple of weeks ago as well, where we were asking, well, if you're having to stand up resources for these operations, where is the drop in performance, and absolutely not surprised to for PSD to have been impacted as well. So absolutely understand that. I think that kind of growth in productivity, James, that you just kind of given us, that little kind of the weekly kind of week on week kind of improvements, that's quite impressive, I have to say. So it does I think give me a bit of a confidence that you're absolutely on the right track there. I think Ilya mentioned data, and data is something that I was also going to ask about as well. So I know obviously we've got the report, we've got numbers in there. What would be quite helpful, maybe kind of with your new focus on kind of performance management metrics and things like that, but would certainly be helpful, I think, for the committee, is to have the data that we currently have in the report in sort of a tabular format of some sorts that really helps us understand how the composition of the different buckets is changing. Because you have told us this, but it's again, from a data presentation perspective, it is easier if it is structured in a format that it's easier to compare reporting period and reporting period. So would really welcome that, and just to understand how many new, how many backlog, etc., etc. James, does it sound unreasonable, or do you have a view on this?
Yes, absolutely. I'm conscious this is only my second committee as well, so as we move forward, hopefully get it into a position that everyone's content with. However, to give you some reassurance, I do have figures, i.e. what comes from Incaru on a monthly basis into non-criminal. So just to give you a flavour, like 117 complaints in the month of June came from the resolution unit into non-criminal, 114 in July and 104 in August. And I've tried to keep this as obviously up to date as much as possible for yourselves. So in total incoming in the last 3 months, there's been 335. But as I mentioned earlier, we've seen significant closures in terms of 190 in August. And even more prior to that in terms of the last few months. So I could get it into a tabular format and maybe share it prior to the next meeting so that we can see if it fits.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much, James. I don't doubt for a second you've got all the data. It is purely that presentation, you know, from a governance and assurance perspective. I'm sure if you work with Darren will be able to kind of help, you know, help shape that, you know, because that's exactly sort of the analogy we've been talking about. I think in the past it's a bathtub analogy, as we're kind of draining the water down on the one side. There is obviously it's being topped up from the top as well. So it's just trying to understand how both of those forces are impacting on the backlog. And I think over time we should be seeing the more, you know, you're obviously emptying the bathtub, the less the age of the cases in that kind of pool should be. So you know, overall, basically, I think we're seeing some really good improvements in this. So it definitely gives us hope. And yeah, just a more kind of visual structure presentation of data, I think, should further help just with those discussions. So but overall, no, I would, you know, really like to thank you for the effort. But you know, as we always say, we cannot sort of, I know there's the attention's on this now, and we're quite keen to give you the support that you need to make sure that it continues to be a priority within amongst all the other priorities, and it doesn't, the progress made doesn't kind of go backwards. But yeah, thank you for that. Okay, it is, we've been going for almost 2 hours. I'm quite conscious. It is 7 minutes to 12. I would be minded if colleagues are still okay to at least do the next report before maybe we have a comfort break at 12, and we'll see where we get to by sort of roughly 12, and then maybe have a little bit of a break, and then get into the next few items of business, if that's okay. So maybe if we just do the Police Scotland, so that's agenda item 8, Police Scotland vetting annual report. And Lynn, I think you're introducing this one.
No, Chair, it's
Or
over
is it
Helen, myself.
Helen, I'm sorry.
No, not at all.
Helen, please.
No, that's fine. Apologies. It did say the ACC, but I will cover this one. So obviously the vetting report that has been prepared is in 2 parts. I guess that the first part showing our recruitment vetting and the kind of the breakdown in relation to refusals across the different categories that we do record. So that's been provided for the committee's update, building on the paper that we provided 18 months ago in relation to some of that. I would like to reflect on some of the comments that have been made during the committee in relation to the trends and patterns, and obviously that kind of we'll look in the future to make sure that we include the previous data as well, so that you can see that data trends and patterns in relation to it. But we have done that consideration in relation to it as well. So the paper, in terms of the vetting side, just outlines obviously that the fact that we continue to invest and train and develop the vetting team. And I'll touch a minute on obviously the vetting landscape and how complex and how developing it is just at the moment for us, but to make sure that they are ensuring that sort of fairness, proportionality within their vetting reviews. In relation to that, I would also highlight, you know, there is a right to appeal within the vetting refusal. So there is also that point of actually reassessment and having a look in terms of that vetting decision that's been made. But in summary, this first part of the paper outlines as I say, the vetting refusals in their percentages aligned to the categories that have been provided in the paper with regards to that. From looking at the paper and speaking to the team, obviously I do recognise just in the small proportion of Q1, the BME refusal proportion is kind of slightly higher than what we've seen in previous, and actually kind of different to the data provided 18 months ago. I did ask the team to do a deep dive in relation to that. They looked at all 25 cases where the vetting has been refused due to ethnicity in terms of BME, and there was a number of reasons in relation to them, but I would like to give the reassurance that they have been reviewed again by the force vetting manager to see if there were any key points or learning within them, but they have been assessed in accordance with our values and our manual of guidance. In terms of a flavour of the refusal reasoning, it did link to adverse traces of the applicant and also adverse traces of family or associates within that as well, which again is patterns we see across all of the refusals within that. So I just highlight that there was nothing in particular that was drawn out in relation to those, but we did do that review, and we do remain committed to within the vetting space, obviously making sure that you know, that the process is fair and balanced in relation to that, and keep an eye, and again looking again at those 6 kind of refusals within that quarter to quarter one, no clear trend or pattern within them, and across a full range of matters with regards to that obviously I won't go into further detail, but I give the committee the reassurance that that has been done with regards to that. So that is the first part of the vetting report, but probably leads me on to just kind of concluding on that one, just talking about the fact that it is a really changing position within our vetting as we look ahead for the PECs. The PECs Act as it comes in for the vetting regulations that we have ahead, the refresh of our manual of guidance, moving towards an authorised professional practice, an APP for vetting, and that's a significant bit of work that's ongoing, where there will be more detail around our processes, which will build on the manual that we've had so far in relation to that. But I really welcome that as we look ahead in the work that's happening. We will also have our code of practice for vetting that comes under the PECs as well. So lots of work happening within the vetting space over the next 6 months, but it doesn't take away from our focus of the day-to-day delivery of the work at the moment, in particular around our recruitment vetting side of the business in terms of that. The second part of the paper, I don't know, would you like me to pause there? Is there any questions before I move on to the HMICS recommendations?
Well, personally, I think logically it makes sense for you to cover the HMICS vetting review as well. So before we open it up.
Fantastic.
Please continue.
Thank you. The second part of the paper then provides an update, obviously, of the work that's been ongoing in relation to the report that was done by HMICS back in October 2023. With regards to that, we stay very linked in and engaged, and obviously Mr. Naylor is on the call or in the meeting, whether he would wish to add any further comments, but very engaged in relation to the progress of the work. And I would give the reassurance around the progression. At the moment, there is 6 of the 15 recommendations that has been discharged, but an update has been provided in relation to the remaining ones in the detail within the report. Of the remaining 9, 3 require the implementation of the PECs Act in relation to what we will see hopefully in the next 6 to 9 months in relation to that, and the other ones in terms of the progression of work, in terms of the policy changes and the engagement and consultation across the organisation aligned to some of the other recommendations. So we remain very committed in this space in continuing to progress the recommendations, but I wouldn't call out anything further, but happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much for that whistle-stop tour across all things vetting. I see Paul, you would like to come in, please.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the chart relating to ethnic origin on page 4. Is that 6 out of 10 BME applicants have been refused for vetting?
Yes.
Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, yes.
60% of them.
That's right.
I get this is done on a case-by-case basis, and as it's appropriate, but how does that compare with the previous period that you looked at?
So I think that was exactly what stood out to me in relation to this data as well. So it was an increase in relation to that, in particular, the fact that it was the 17% of the overall applicants in terms of that refusal within that group, which is why we made sure, obviously, we did the deeper dive into it, the review of the applications, and the decisions do stand in relation to each of those, but we will continue to monitor and also see, obviously, if there are any points of improvement or development that we can make in relation to that.
Yeah, but how does that compare to previous periods? Is this a spike or?
So obviously the 24-25 is provided there at 7.8%, and that was, I think, my understanding in line with the previous report that was provided. So yeah, so the 2024-25 was the 7.8% of overall matters refusals sat within the BME, and obviously, as we said, that 17 increases. My understanding of the 7.8 wasn't that, and apologies, I can't recall the exact number off the top of my head, but it was in line with the previous report that was provided, if not just a little bit bigger. But obviously that significant increase up to 17 is the one that has drawn obviously that review to make sure that we are balanced within all of that. But when I say we've focused on those 6, we have looked at all 25, which is the 19 from the 2024 period and also the 6 in the first quarter of this year.
Yeah, no, again, it's small numbers and it's very difficult to draw statistical learning from very, very small numbers. Hopefully it's just a spike, but if it's not, well, it is what it is. Anyway, thanks, Chair.
I would give the reassurance, I think, that importance of the continuum monitoring, and also as we have done with our complaint matters, working with our Policing Together colleagues. Obviously, we've done a lot of work with the recruitment team in relation to that, and people understanding the vetting process, the importance of declaration and the integrity of the process being so important. So we will continue to monitor that, but also, you know, my reflections actually is there that link in with Policing Together as well in terms of anything else that we could be doing around that, as we know our vetting landscape is changing ahead as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you both for that. Right, I have got Chris next, and then Angela, please, Chris.
Thanks, thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report. Paul's picked up on one of the things that I was going to ask about. The other was just to ask for an update in terms of the vetting application forms, so referred to in 2.2, and what the timescale is on this.
Yes, thank you very much. And I think a really important point in terms of this, ensuring that we are capturing that actual data in terms of it's probably coming alongside now our amendment in terms of our movement to the APP within vetting and just the changes that we've got over the next 6 to 9 months. And I'm hoping that it will align with that, unless we can bring in something kind of earlier with that, but there will be changes at that point. Nathan, I know you're on the screen, and I don't know whether you've got any other thought. Obviously, for the committee's awareness, Nathan, it's one of his areas of responsibility, the force vetting manager, who couldn't join us today in relation to the presentation of this paper, but that is an area that has been spoken about for a little while, and we are keen to see that come, complete. But we've also got a very changing vetting area at the moment with our APP and different developments. So Nathan, I don't know if you've got any more around a timescale of that, which looks at the vetting applications and the capturing of the protected characteristics and diversity data.
Helen, sorry, unable to provide any further update. However, I can bring an update to the next committee if that's helpful.
Yeah, I would suggest it probably would be.
Yeah, I think it would be. I mean, I think we're keen to see progress in this area. Appreciate the point that's been made about its relationship to other developments, but I think it's important that progress happens.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Angela, please.
Thank you. Just 2 questions on the HMICS report. I just wanted to ask about the PECS Act and when that will be implemented. And it was in relation to the clearance of staff members who can't, or the dispense with the service of the officer or staff member who can't maintain suitable vetting. I just wondered whether that particular piece of legislation had been informed by experiences that the service had had to deal with in the past. And then in relation to the next 2 recommendations, 2 and 3, really welcome the introduction or making sure that everybody's had recruitment vetting and then subsequent vetting every 10 years. I just wondered whether there were targets, there were milestones that had been set to demonstrate the progress that was being made towards both of those. The target date is ongoing, and I just wondered whether there was an opportunity to be a bit more precise in terms of percentages that will be hit by when. Thank you.
Yep, thank you very much. I'm very happy to try and address those points. So the PECS Act did come into commencement at the end of June, but only parts of it were implemented or commenced at that point in relation to it. The vetting part is one of those ones where the requirement is to wait until the vetting regulations have been developed by the Scottish Government in relation to that. So we continue to feed in as much as possible in relation to the development of the vetting regs. The vetting part is absolutely critical for us, and we are really, really keen to see that introduction as soon as possible with regards to that, aligned to the code of practice that we need to develop, and making sure that our APP is revised, developed, and in line with all of the other bits of work that's working through. So while, as I say, parts of the PECS Act has been implemented and commenced, that part isn't. We have been speaking to the Scottish Government in relation to, and I know that they are hoping for, the kind of the last quarter of this financial year, the start of next year is what we are working towards. And I can see Mr. Naylor nodding in terms of, that's the update that we've been provided, but that very much is sitting with the Scottish Government. But we are really, really keen to see that move forward in relation to that part of it, because that will be the first opportunity that we've had to have that ability under legislation to withdraw the recruitment vetting from officer and staff. At the moment, there can be a withdrawal of management vetting and any other enhanced level of vetting in the right circumstances and when it's the proportionate thing to do. But obviously that, as legislation and as highlighted by HMICS, will be the first part that we can do that around the recruitment vetting side. So hopefully that answers that bit, and it does also then link in with some of the work that we're doing around some of the other recommendations. The 10-year renewals is a particular piece of work that we have been trying to drive forward. Unfortunately, our current manual of guidance does not have that as part of the process, and we are currently in consultation with the Federation, ASPS and the trade unions in respect of an interim policy around that whilst we await the longer term bits of work. So it's work in progress that we are trying to prioritise and take forward, alongside making sure, though, it is fair, that we've done the necessary consultation and policy matters are in place around it. So hopefully that answers the questions.
Sorry, I thought the consultation had finished. Reading the management response, it says this follows an extent. This is recommendation 3. Follows an extensive period of local consultation with staff associations. The impression is that this is now good to go following the consultation. Is that, did I misread that?
You have not misread that, but unfortunately, there was a number of points raised during the consultation that we are now trying to work through.
Okay. And do we have any timescale? Are these significant, or are you hopeful that these can be resolved reasonably?
I hope we can continue to work through them. We are getting some additional advice in relation to it, and are trying to work through, and I'm happy to bring an update back to the next committee in respect of that one, because it is one at the moment, as highlighted by HMICS, that we had hoped that we would be able to, before the PECS Act comes in, and we will have to make that decision about whether we await the full manual of guidance revision or whether it's something we can do through interim policy, which is one of the key points of debate at this point.
Okay, so just on that, I'm on ARAC as well. I take it that will be reflected in various risk registers.
Yes.
Delay in this. Okay.
Yes,
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Just on this one as well, actually, I don't think we've mentioned this. So I think this committee has got a role within recommendation 14. And I suppose I was just kind of seeking assurance that there will be engagement between SPA officials and Police Scotland before any submission to HMICS in terms of consideration for discharge. So it's just that, I'm conscious of the fact that the committee has got a role to play. So just taking that assurance that there will be that engagement.
Yes. Yes, very much, and we are hoping that that's one of the recommendations that is nearing a point that we can conclude that. But yes, that engagement is important. I recognise that. Thank you.
Good. No, thank you for that. Okay, that was good discussion. So colleagues, again, I know I promised a break, but considering that we did kind of just touch on PECs already to a degree, I think logically it might make sense just to plow on to do that and the committee work plan, and then have a little bit of a break before we start the private session, if colleagues are okay. Yeah, I see nodding. Okay, thank you for bearing with me. Okay, so who is talking us through the PECs bill update? Is that Helen? Sorry, apologies. No rest for Helen. Agenda item 9.
The ACC is actually going to start this one,
Right.
and then I'm very happy to contribute to any of the discussions just in
Of
relation
course.
to the Code of Ethics. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well,
Thanks, Chair. So if I may, I'll just sort of outline some considerations around the Code of Ethics. And I think, as members would recall, we'd hoped to get a separate and specific meeting to discuss this, but the level of business just didn't afford that. So we've got the discussion here today. And as members will be aware, PECs required the Chief Constable to bring the Code of Ethics into statute, and amongst other obligations, the SPA should be involved in the preparation of those Code of Ethics. And I think it's important just to highlight that Police Scotland, despite the lack, if you like, of legislative obligation, we already did have a Code of Ethics which has been in place since the inception of Police Scotland in 2013, and it spans both our officers and staff. It's very, very well socialised, an extensive training programme and ongoing refresh and awareness raising of it. So it's the notion of a Code of Ethics, if you like, and the existing Code of Ethics is very well and extensively embedded in the organisation. So in terms of the obligations in and around PECs, I think as we saw it, we'd sort of 3 options around the Code of Ethics. One was to stick with the Code of Ethics, the current code that we had. Another potentially was to sort of develop an entirely new Code of Ethics, and the third option being to use the existing Code of Ethics as a foundation, if you like, or a base for a refreshed and revised Code of Ethics that we would then build upon. And I suppose really the picture or proposal is around that third option, just given its longevity, the familiarity, the awareness, the training, etc., etc. So in furtherance of that, the project team and legal services have worked together to make sure that we've adhered to the codes and principles that we're obliged to in developing those Code of Ethics, and ensure that we are, as I say, compliant with all that. Consultation, which is another part of it, is ongoing across a number of partners and business areas and staff associations. We have at this stage received some limited feedback on that, which I know that Alan, who's been involved in Helen, will correct me if there's anything further. But largely that limited feedback has been very much focused on us simplifying what's included in the Code of Ethics to make it, and I see some nods there, to make it, I suppose, if you like, a slightly easier read. And that, as I say, the consultation and the feedback is ongoing, and we will absolutely take all of that on board as we develop this. So I suppose in summary, our proposal, the option that we would like to take forward is that third option, and furtherance of the Code of Ethics, i.e. use the existing one as a base and build on that. And I don't know whether, Chair, you would like to have a further discussion about the Code of Ethics at the moment, or do that sort of second PECs update that Helen will come in and will take any questions or points in the round as you see fit.
I have got no massive preference. I think we could probably continue at this stage. And then,
in that case, then I'll hand over to Helen for anything else from the PECs update. Thank you.
Yep, no, thank you, ACC. Thank you, Chair. I guess I just wanted to very briefly give the reassurance in terms of the continual progression of the PECs work, the work that's been done in relation to the duty of candour and the other elements that were kind of switched on at the end of June in relation to that. And that we very much, our next key part is this delivery of the Code of Ethics for Policing in Scotland as part of this. So this consultation being an extremely important part of that for us, and the involvement of the authority in relation to the development of that code. The team are working on the Moodle package that will then subsequently support the parts that have been switched on, with the Code of Ethics being an absolutely critical part of that. So I think it's a really important point for us at this point, where we can stop and reflect on the feedback that has been provided, and we are still waiting for some more to come in. Some consultees have indicated to us that they will come in the next little while with us, but needed a small extension. So we are continuing to work through that. I would like to give the committee the reassurance that obviously the PECS Act does outline elements that we have to consider in the development of the Code of Ethics. We have done that review. We have consulted with legal services in respect of that. It did result in some minor amendments to the Code of Ethics, mainly around the standards of professional behaviour, duty of candour, part of it. But there was nothing else that was identified in that engagement, in that consultation. And again, obviously, as part of the consultation that's ongoing, if that was flagged by any of the consultees, then obviously we could clearly reflect on that. But that was something that we worked through in terms of that legal review in respect of that. But other than that, I probably don't have any other points other than obviously to invite if there are any comments in relation to the Code of Ethics as it's proposed.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. I think it was quite helpful for us to kind of really understand the process and then understand the end result of that. You know, good to know obviously that the consultation is ongoing, incredibly important that that's being done properly. So, you know, I kind of acknowledge the assurance around that sufficient levels of engagement. I think that's really good. I would like to bring colleagues in, and at some stage Darren as well, just to kind of give the SPA's perspective in terms of engagement and kind of work done so far as well. But Chris, before we do that, Chris, over to you. You've got a question or observation.
Thanks very much, Chair, and yeah, thanks for the update. It's really helpful, as Chair says, to understand the process and the context in relation to this. It was my question was in relation to the points that you've made actually in terms of the duty of candour and those aspects of the code that relate to that in the integrity section. And my understanding is that, I'm just looking at those last couple of bullets there in the integrity section, reference the duty of candour, that there is some difference here, some omission in what's here as distinct from what's in the legislation. And I think, you know, I mean, we all understand the importance of officers having a clear and consistent understanding of professional standards. And so I just wanted to understand something about the rationale for those omissions.
Thank you in relation to that question, and I'm very happy to take that away and reflect on it. I think what's really important for me though is that the Code of Ethics isn't, and I don't think for any second you're implying this, a direct lift from the legislation or from the standard of professional behaviour. We have the 11 standards of professional behaviour that very much form the misconduct assessment, or the assessment of conduct, let me say, sorry, in relation to the actions undertaken by officers, and I would give you the reassurance that that part within our standard is very much aligned in terms of the wording. What we've then tried to do is to take elements of that and translate it into the code, which for me is about how we're policing, about how we're doing things, and is not that measurement in terms of the behaviours that come through the standards of professional behaviour, which is the conduct side of things. So thank you for raising that point. I'm very happy to take it. But what we've tried, and just, you know, kind of do that double check, but what we've tried to do is to lift the relevant key points, build it into the code, but the standard of behaviour and the duty of candour stand separately in the standards of professional behaviour in relation to the actual action. Sorry, I don't know if I don't know if I've explained that sufficiently well to address the question, but I'm very happy to as I say, to take it away and reflect in terms of the additional bullet points. But I don't think what we would want would be a direct lift and transfer across, because we need to make sure that this is, as much as possible, pulling out the key parts of it, but talking about how we do things in the code.
Yeah, I understand. I understand the point you're making. I understand the point about the direct lift. I think it would be important to look at, nevertheless, to look at the emissions there and the alignment and what that means in practice.
Yeah. And thank you for raising it, because again, that's not something that had been raised to my attention. So I'll certainly take that away to have a look at it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Darren, is there anything you would like to say from an space perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Helen. We've had a quick catch up over the course of the last few days, so nothing I'm sharing is coming as a surprise. But I think just for the benefit of the public session, so in addition to the kind of point there around about duty of candour, I think, and Helen, you've touched on this sort of already to a point this morning. Just that point around about having regard to the principal standards and codes listed in paragraph 211, and that wording within the Act of have regard has a particular legal context which requires that these are not only taken into account, but that there are clear reasons for departing from or disregarding their contents. So I suppose it's really just in terms of the authority, in terms of that its own duty in terms of involvement in the preparation of the code is really kind of transparent understanding that due regard has been given. So I suppose it was really just to explicitly understand that if the understanding from the report that there was nothing within those principal standards or codes which was identified which would justify further amendment beyond what has been done already, or whether in fact there were particular provisions which were considered but rejected, and the objective justification for that. That was probably just the first point. I'll maybe just kind of pause there. My subsequent points probably more just simple process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair. Would you like me to
please,
come
yeah.
back in? So yes, that it's certainly my understanding that from the review undertaken by the team and the legal services team, there was nothing that required that amendment in order to comply with that having regard or having due regard for those matters. But obviously that point has now been raised. I will take that away. If I am in a position that I can provide what the feedback that we got or share that with yourself, Darren, I'm happy to do that. I would like to give the reassurance that we are taking every part of the code of the Act, and making sure that we apply that in our development of the code. So I would seek to provide that reassurance in the way that I can, and I will take that away just to kind of review that consultation that happened with our legal services and the team, and to bring that back to give that reassurance.
Thank you, Helen. Chair, is it okay just to come back on the very last point? Yeah, as I say, it's more a minor point of process. So it's simply around about recognising what we've discussed already, and obviously Police Scotland are in the process of or midway through the consultation exercise. So really it was just to understand future engagement formally with the committee in terms of being cited on Police Scotland's the consultation responses received, and meaningful consideration of that in advance of a final draft being laid before Parliament. Thank you, Darren. And I guess I would ask what, in terms of the committee's thoughts in relation to what you would like, and I'm sorry to turn that back round in relation to that. I am really keen that we can have that discussion when that consultation has concluded and we've got the key points and we've got that final draft. But also I would have concerns about that fitting into the next complaints and conduct, because we are trying to work to as quick as timescale as we possibly can while getting it right. But this is about also that the training and the development and the building of all of this into the organisation. So, Chair, I'm very happy to welcome any suggestions as to how we might take that best forward for the committee.
Understood. No, understood. I mean, I think a practical or a pragmatic solution might well be a circulation of this by correspondence in between the committee cycles, so that members do see the final kind of draft of the code and have an opportunity. And I mean, I understand that the turnaround, but members have an opportunity to comment within short time scales. Because I think it is important. I think considering the role of the SPA, we need to beside this. We need to have a look at it, and that just seems like a most pragmatic option if colleagues agree. I see no dissent, so I'm just very quickly going to take it as agreement before people have a chance to change their mind. But I think it is important we have a role, and I think this is the committee within the SPA to whom I think it falls squarely into our remit to have a look into provide an opinion. But as I say, we will be taking a lot of the assurance from the process that sits behind the development of the code. So I think for us it's important to see both the final output as well as being assured that it's been through the appropriate levels of development and engagement. So that's where we get a lot of our comfort from as well. Okay, everybody's nodding, right? Very good. I see no further points on this. Thank you so much. So the last one that we have in the public session, the last agenda item, is the committee work plan, and I have to say, as I was reviewing this, there's obviously a lot of regular things that we do. There's also quite a few sort of ad hoc things that we have got sitting at TBC. And if I remember correctly, I think our kind of approach has always been like, we will need to see when some of these things should be scheduled, bearing in mind all the other things that Police Scotland officers have got on their plate, and all the other items of business for the committee as well. So there's obviously an impact on both sides, and we need to be quite mindful of that. There's quite a few things sitting as TBC. I would maybe suggest, or Darren, do you have a suggestion? Before I suggest, Darren, what is your wisdom on this?
Yeah, so Catherine, I'm conscious that there's an action that's been here for a wee while, but I'm also acutely aware of kind of some of the pressures on the team in PSD. So, but what I would be keen to do is to sit down with Helen and the team, and really, there are a number of kind of thematic reports that have been sought. I would be keen to kind of work with colleagues in Police Scotland to understand, within a reasonable time frame, what works best for them. But recognising that there is an expectation around about kind of annual reporting. But we would be really keen to be able to come back to the next committee with a clear dates around about each of these. I think it probably sits alongside, as I mentioned earlier on, probably a broader conversation around about with that in mind, thinking through the proportionality in terms of what the frequency of some of the kind of routine data that has come to the committee, and the proportionality of the frequency with which that should come going forward. So for example, data that perhaps has come every quarter, where in actual fact that may be more proportionate and helpful to the committee on perhaps a biannual basis, but where that's providing rolling trends. So not providing answers specifically just now, but really keen to work with Police Scotland. We've kind of had an approach to reporting which has evolved over time.
Adding on things, haven't we? I think that's just what it feels a little bit like to me, and quite frankly, like this committee is already going to be quite long. So not like I would want to cut any of our discussion short, but there at some stage there comes a limit in terms of the value of data, etc. So we're all acutely aware of that. Can I leave that with you, maybe to try and work out with Helen, and then before the next committee cycle, I will maybe link in with you as well. This was my suggestion, so that by the time we kind of, by the time we arrive with the work plan at the next committee, it's a more final kind of product that hits that between our assurance needs, but also the pragmatism and the fact that there is a cost to the public purse in terms of fulfilling our assurance needs to a degree. So so that we're really pragmatic and flexible, and then hopefully that will give colleagues in the committee some assurance that it has been thought through, and then if there is any challenge, we've got a more final product that people can opine on, if that works. And I don't see anybody disagreeing. So again, I'm very quickly going to take that as consent for the approach. So thank you for that. Okay, it is now 12:30. I was going to suggest that maybe if we take 15-20 minutes. I mean, not quite a lunch break, but you know, a slightly more extended comfort break, and maybe reconvene at 10 to 1, and then we go straight into our private